Mike, and we're going to learn about search this week. So we're going to kind of pick up where we left off from last week's webinar. In the last webinar, we learned about how to incorporate metadata into a corpus that we've developed, and that project that we started last week, we're going to kind of continue. We incorporated metadata into a corpus, a subcorpus of the BAWE, the British Academic Written English corpus, and we're going to continue that this week. And we're going to start searching the corpus a little bit. If you want to follow along, I have uploaded the new program, or the new project into the UAMCT webinar folder. That's available. The folder is available. It's in a Google Drive shared folder, and you can access it on the NASFLO website or on the Facebook the Facebook event. So you can access those either place, and I do encourage you to download that and kind of follow along as I'm going through the different queries that we're going to be doing today. So here's kind of the agenda. This is going to be a two-part webinar. So next week is when we'll get to the more kind of advanced text-based search, but this week we're going to start simple with the menu-driven search, and we'll talk about kind of different aspects of that. And then next week we'll learn how to do a text-based search where you're actually typing in queries. The menu-driven search is mostly just kind of point and click menu buttons and drop-down menus and everything. So I think it's really good if you're getting started for the first time doing corpus search, and it's certainly powerful enough to handle most queries, I would think. So you can always do menu-driven search, and I think it's a good place to start with any kind of exploration of a corpus. But next week we will talk about the very specific corpus query language that Mick is included in this. It's based off of Sketch Engine's corpus query language, which was developed in the 1990s, is another corpus tool. And so we'll learn about that and the syntax and everything. But this week we're going to just focus on menu-driven search. So I crowdsourced a few queries that we could use from Facebook, from my friends list, and these are some of the queries that people wanted to know about the BAWE corpus. Just as a quick refresher, we do have in the BAWE subcorpus, we have 20 texts, 10 are from the humanities, 10 are from the sciences. The actual split, if I remember correctly, is something like 5 from English, 5 from history, 5 from math, and 5 from one of the physical sciences, either physics or chemistry. And so that's kind of the overall disciplinary breakdown. So we're going to be asking these queries and kind of relating them to that subcorporate makeup, trying to understand perhaps some linguistic differences between the disciplines, which is always something that's worth exploring. I will remind you that these are all our corpus is all undergraduate students in the British university system. So these certainly aren't necessarily representative of the expert from LCT. We're not talking about the field of production. We're talking about the field of the arena of reproduction. So let's take a look at some of these queries here. We've got which clauses is frequency and distribution and function different in different disciplines. I think we can handle that with search. Certainly frequency is something that would be better handled in a statistical analysis, which means that we'll probably come back to this query later on when we do statistics. These other two are pretty straightforward straightforward corpus queries. Are there any thus instances? Certainly a word that's unusual in spoken English. In written English, maybe a little bit more common. So we'll take a look at that. We've got maybe, secondly, or second, which would be interesting too. Okay, we'll take a look at that. The use of as a conjunction similar to since or because. Also curious whether this is more common now than it used to be. So if you can time travel, do that. That's what one friend asked. The time travel bit is something that we can do because we have time metadata. Unfortunately, I didn't have the time to incorporate that metadata into the project. So we'll have to put a pin in that and come back to it next week. But we will answer that question. But the basic question of what does as a conjunction look like, that's definitely something that we'll be able to answer today. The number of embedded clauses, specifically who and that, and then patterns of clause complex and embedding across disciplines and genres. Those were two different people, but related questions, and we'll definitely be able to try and answer those to some extent. Certainly the first one and the second one is quite broad, and so that may be more of a statistical question as well. So let's get at it. I'm going to go ahead and exit out here and open up our project. As always, the chat is open if you have questions or anything that you want to add. I didn't have this in the agenda, but I want to add a couple layers here, and they are very basic layers, but they come in so handy when you're running search. So what I'm going to do now is create two layers. One I'm going to call clauses. It's going to be a manual annotation layer. I'm going to design my own. And it's going to be segments within the document. I don't need a special layer. And it's just going to be clauses. It's just going to separate out the clauses. Not going to tag them in any way. They're all just going to be clause. Okay? And then we're going to add another layer called sentences. Manual annotation, design your own, segments within a document, click no, and then sentences. So there we go. All right, so we've got these two other layers, and it'll kind of become clear, maybe not this time, maybe not this this webinar, but certainly by next webinar, it'll become clear why these layers are useful. And we'll get into actually the documents layer today. So we created that layer last week, and it's going to become very useful, actually essential, for answering some of those queries that we have this week. So it's time to get into the actual tab where we're going to do our searches. And there it is, search. Just a couple things to note here. The search tab defaults to text-based search, and you'll see here we've got the placeholders word equals the, and then tag equals NN, which means that it's going to run an automatic search of all nouns that that are preceded by the word the. But we're not going to do that. We're going to actually switch it up and go to menu-driven search. So I have a few notes on that we're going to discuss here. Menu-based or menu-driven search is an interface for search that relies on buttons and drop-down menus. As I've mentioned before, it is easier when you're first starting, and it allows you, I think one of the virtues of it is that it allows you to become familiar with the choices in the systems. The UMCT is a particular instantiation of the SFL system networks, and certainly there are limitations on human memory. I don't have every single possible linguistic feature from every system in SFL committed to memory. I usually end up consulting IFG. I think that's an experience for many SFL researchers. There's definitely some systems that I'm far more familiar with, and some that are, relatively simple, theme and ream. And I think most of us have committed to memory the clause types and transitivity and whatnot. But as you'll see, there's going to be a lot of features that show up, especially in the mood system, that are, God, there's just a lot to consider when we're looking at mood. So I think the menu-based search is a good way to kind of become familiar with the different systems as they're instantiated in the UAM-CT. So let's get into it. Certainly, you could also just take a look at the schema, right? The scheme. If we go into mood and go to depth 9, you can see there's just a lot of features to look at. Those are all going to show up when we do this search. So let's actually go back really quick to our queries, and let's pick one here that is going to be, let's do a simple one first. So any thus instances, maybe secondly or second. Those are certainly very basic queries, but they rely on, well, actually, yeah, we could do this. I was thinking about it. I would instantly, because I know the CQL, the Corpus query language, I would go straight to the text-based search, but we can do this in the menu-based search. So let's go ahead and try it out. So we want to look for any instances of thus. What we need then is just a basic unit to search for, like word, and then look for any words that are the word thus. Okay, that's kind of how I'm going to think about this. So then we need to look for a layer that will allow us to do this. I think that the mood layer has a feature called word, if I'm not mistaken. Let's take a look. There it is. So if you know what, I forgot again to download that really handy cursor thing. But what I was doing there, by the way, I should do a little explanation here. So when we go into menu-driven search, we see search for, and then we've got this drop-down menu. You can obviously select these different system networks, and I just chose mood And then I went down to the arrow here and clicked on it, and that was the way that that you can scroll. That is the only way, as far as I know, that you can scroll. You can also use the arrow keys on your keyboard, and that apparently does it a whole lot faster. I hadn't really realized that. So we're going to select the feature word, and then we're going to add a relation. This is actually going a little faster than what I thought. I hadn't planned this out as well as I should have. So let's actually, let's back up just 1 minute here. I apologize for the confusion. So before we get into that kind of a search, let's just do a very basic one. A feature search. Okay, it's a query to the corpus that returns all segments that match a feature. Okay, so what if we wanted to see every word, we could do that. Lordy, lordy, I haven't run this search before, but you can see it's taking quite a long time because it's a ridiculous search. I can't imagine why we would ever want to run a search on every word in the corpus. It may even make it crash. No, it didn't. Okay. I was worried there for a second that it might crash. Okay, this is a really stupid search. I'm going to stop it right now. Let's look at a different feature. Okay. Maybe something a little bit more specific. So let's just look at material configurations. There we go. Okay, so let's take a look at the results screen here. You'll notice here at the top, in order to run this search, I clicked on the show button. Okay, so I selected material configurations and then click show. We've got the hits here. So the screen is right now displaying 0 through 33 of 3,171. And to go from page to page, we click on previous or next. Okay. In the actual holder for the results, we have several different kinds of data here. We have the file that the material configuration occurs in. We have the pretext. We have the actual search result, and then we have the post text. We can increase that pre and post text up to nine words or 9 tokens. I think it's 9 words actually. Okay, so we can increase that. That can be helpful in certain contexts, certainly. We're not going to increase it at the moment. But here we've got the actual search results. So let's take a look. So we've got forge here. There's the configuration, moving, addressing, reconcile. It appeared. I questioned that one. It appeared. I'm trying to remember if that one would be. I would analyze that, I think, probably as mental. But at any rate, so you can kind of see the configurations here. You'll note that these are black and this is blue text. When we click on the blue text, we go into an annotation window, and it automatically selects or highlights the segment that we were looking at. In this case, it was a qualifier for a nominal group. It looks like their aims. And then there was a qualifier to forge. So the forge is a clause, non-finite clause. It's material and it's monotransitive. So that's one of our results here. As always, we can toggle between segment and table view. This is probably the preferred one. So there we go. Okay, so that's just a basic feature search. Suppose you want to, oh, this is a handy one. Let's look at all the themes, right? This is going to take a minute because it's not as ridiculous a search as look at all the words, but it certainly is kind of a handful here. Okay, so here we've got all the themes. You'll note that some of these are duplicates, and that's because when it runs a search for a theme, it will look for every tag of it. And sometimes a segment might be tagged the theme of maybe a clause complex and then also the theme of a clause. And so that's why it gets duplicated. So we would want to potentially limit this to, I guess the thing that would make the most sense is the theme of every clause, but and so just limit it to the theme of clause, because if it's a theme of a clause, then it's probably the theme also of a clause complex, I would think. So at any rate, so that's one other kind of search that you can do here. So that's a basic feature search. So now let's actually go back to our original query and do the word one. We're going to add a couple other concepts when we do this. So, as I showed before, the search for every word is going to be ridiculous. What we need to do is limit the search, right? If we run a search on every word and ask it to return every word, that would be a complete waste of resources, and it wouldn't get us the answer that we want. So what we need to do is to limit the search. So there are several different ways that you can limit the search or potentially expand it. If you're familiar at all with any kind of, if you're an academic, you've certainly probably run searches on library databases before, and I imagine that most of us who are watching this are academics. But if you haven't, the standard operators, standard search Boolean operators are and, or, and not. An operator is just an operation that you can apply to a search, and the operation can either do an and operation, which asks or queries the corpus to look for all instances or all segments that have this feature and that feature. Okay, so if we wanted to look at all material and mental, we could do that, and that would certainly be expanding the search. We could also do or. So we want, actually, let's see. Those are going to be two different things here. Okay, so let's look at all segments that are material and mental. I think that's going to be nothing. Yeah. So because those are two mutually exclusive categories. So say we wanted all, I'm trying to think here, what would make sense. This was not something I was planning on actually thinking about, the and operations, because I thought they were pretty self-explanatory, but it is worth at least kind of looking into how you would actually set that up. I don't use this operator too often. It just hasn't come up as being particularly helpful or useful for what I'm trying to do in my own research. But what it will do is all segments that have this feature and that feature. So that's why we got 0 results here. But if we did an OR and did all segments that are either material or mental, then we're going to get a lot. We're going to get a hell of a lot more than what we did initially, because it's going to include material. And yeah, so there's 3,000 results there. Some of them are material and some of them are mental. But it would be in mood probably that I would look to find 2 different features. Oh, this is a new feature that I discovered. So nominalizations. So let's look for all segments that have a normalization and something else. I can't imagine why this would be a meaningful query, but let's just do it. So all future clauses, and they've got nominalization in them. And we're going to remove this actually and do an and then we'll do oh, this is actually somewhat meaningful. All normalizations that are count nouns. How about that? There we go. Okay, so this is going to be restricting the query, right? If we just do normalizations, there are 1,500 results. When we add the and operator and include only those normalizations that are count nouns, come on, then we get 874. So there we go. That's a meaningful use of the operator, and then or as well. And then there's also and not. That happens sometimes when I want to restrict. I use that one sometimes when I want to restrict. For example, I don't want to look at non-finite clauses, something like that, or exclude a particular word. But I'm not going to model that right now. I think it'll probably come in more handy if we deal with that at a later date. So, but those 2 operators and an or are quite useful in certain situations. Let me just kind of move on here to the other and I think probably more useful aspect of the menu-driven search, which is relations. These are ways to, I think these all just limit. As we saw just a minute ago, and is going to limit the search, or is going to expand the search. But relations are ways to limit the search by specifying a relationship between the feature queried and then some other string, segment, or field. All right. So we have the relation of containing, and you can look for a feature that contains a segment or contains a particular string, or a CQL query, which we will handle at a later date next week. You can also look for a feature that is in a particular segment. So we have these 2 different, we have basically classifying and compositional relationships, kind of, and then part of relationships. So containing or in another segment. And then you can also look for segments that have a particular field, and that's going to become really important because if you remember from last week, all of our metadata is stored as part of field variables. So that's what we're going to be querying quite a lot, actually. And then also filling role. And I'm actually going to start with containing is probably the one that we'll use the most, but I'm going to back up really quick and do another fun, just kind of fun one. Filling role, I think, is the one that I used the first time because the first time I ever did a search, because my favorite search to do in SFL is to look for all the actors, right? To do an agency analysis and look for all the actors and material clauses. So let's set up that query. We're going to go to transitivity, obviously, and then actor is a kind of participant. So we're going to select participant, and then we're going to select the relation of filling role. The role is actor. For the most part, the stuff that you type into the search here is going to be case insensitive, but I have found that that the roles, the named roles in the various system networks are case sensitive. So your mileage may vary here. If you are having a problem with a query, try changing the case. Sometimes it works. We're going to type in actor here, and now we're going to get all the actors and material clauses in our corpus. We have 1,300 hits here. That's great. We have some pronouns here. That's kind of interesting. I hadn't seen that very much. So here we go. These are all the actors. What we would potentially be interested in now is limiting it to specific disciplines. Yeah. The corpus is set up right now where the earlier texts in the corpus are the humanities ones, and then the later ones are from the sciences. It looks like we're kind of getting into, actually, no, that is not the case. Okay. These are probably from the sciences, but let's take a look then. Let's take a look at ones in a specific specific discipline group. Before I do that, actually, I want to show you one other aspect of the interface here. We've looked at almost everything except for these two buttons, right? So this button is going to give you frequency counts. So I guess I lied that we can't really do much statistics. So this is going to give you the frequency counts. My word, Elliot is doing quite a lot in this corpus. Hardy, Florence. We have a lot of actors, it looks like, in humanities stuff. Hardy, Elliot, that's all probably from an English text, I would guess. A lot of pronouns, that's pretty typical. Dickens. It is, I think this is an interesting finding just initially. The humanities are overrepresented. Yeah, right? We're not seeing a ton of actors in material clauses in the science texts. So that's interesting. I need to think about how I would explain that. Okay, so there's one query. Now, finally, we'll get back to the queries that we had a minute ago. The word queries. But before I want to do that, I want to show you one more thing here, and that is let's limit this one more way by restricting the field. Oh my, I forgot. That is going to be kind of complicated. Okay, we will deal with that in just a minute. Let's go back actually to our other queries. I cannot even remember them at this point, so let's do a quick refresher. So we were going to look for instances of thus, and also second or secondly. All right, so let's do that. So I'm going to go back to the initial results, and I'll do the save button there at the very end. I'll explain that one too. So let's go back to what we were going to do a minute ago, which was select word. And now we need to use either one of the operators or one of the relations to kind of capture the word that we want to look for, which is thus. So if we look at the drop-down menu here, the one that makes the most sense is containing string. If you remember last week, we learned about strings. They're a particular type of data type. If you've done any kind of computer science, you know about data types, strings, integers, floats. A string is a set of characters, and it usually is instantiated as word, but it doesn't have to be. So we're going to look for a word containing a string. So a word is a feature in the mood system, and we want any word, any segment that is tagged as a word that also contains the string thus. Okay? So I just typed it in there. It is supposed to be case insensitive, so we'll see what happens. There's this issue of anywhere and immediately. I will get some answers on that one. I don't actually know what that means. So we'll get into that maybe next week. All right. So we have an answer to the question, are there any instances of thus? Yes, there are. And we've got the seed was planted for Pustuski's. That must be the Polish text. Got a thus dealing with left a general discontent. I imagine that's from history text. Those all look like they're from history. We have down here carcinogen, that's probably from science. I'm now really interested where the hell are these coming from? So let's add this second layer of the query. So I had mentioned a minute ago that this is going to be complicated, and it is, but we're going to deal with it now. So this is a very basic query, and we could also run the other one, right? Second. Okay. Secondly, let's see, that shows up. Secondly, okay. If we wanted to see all forms of second, we can add, I was going to throw this in maybe later, but it's good to deal with it now. So if we want the words or the string second, and then basically any variation of that, we can do basically what we do in any kind of search situation, which is put in a wildcard character. And in the CQL language, that wildcard character is the asterisk. It's the star. So when we press show here, well, that's interesting. I thought it would come up with second or secondly or secondary, but it doesn't. That's interesting. That's a limitation here of the of that particular of using the menu-driven search. It's not supposed to do that. Let me try something. Typically in CQL, when we do a string, we put it in quotes. So let's try that. Maybe that will do something. Yeah, it thinks I'm looking for the word second in quotes, which I'm not. Try this again. And that is really strange. Okay, Well, that is a question that I will have to try and figure out later. Maybe immediately does something. Nope, it does not. So we've got second here, and we have secondly, but let's go back to thus. We had kind of a bigger hit. Your set of results there. Does immediately change anything here? It's the same count. Okay, so let's see if there's any difference in terms of the number in the different disciplinary. Let's just do the disciplinary groups, the humanities versus the sciences. Okay, so that information was stored in a particular field variable. If you remember from last week, that field variable was called disciplinary group. And that that field variable had two values. One was AH, arts and humanities, and the other value was PS, physical sciences. So we're going to remove this relation, and we're going to create a new relation. That relation is going to be containing segment. We stored that information in a particular layer. That layer was document, okay? So we're going to go into the documents layer, and every text is tagged with the documents tag, okay? Every text has that. And then what we're going to do is add another layer. That layer is going to be the field, right? So we clicked with field, and we have a drop-down menu. We're going to check disciplinary group, and we're going to choose, let's start with arts and humanities. And then we have to add one more thing, which is the string. And that's going to be thus. Let's see if this shows up. It gave us nothing. I think it's because I put it in the wrong spot. We should probably put it here. I guess we can't. This is tricky. Let's try something else. Let's do the containing string, thus, and then let's do an and. Yeah, there we go. And in segment, wait, no, that's not what I want. All right, I'm going to remove that. Let's try this again. Documents with field, disciplinary group, AH. Now let's try it. It may be just a matter of, yeah, there we go. Okay, so I'm sorry, I didn't really explain what the hell I was doing there. So I started with, I want a word containing the string thus. Oops. And then I added another relation of in segment, and that segment was documents. And then in that one I chose, oops, I chose not filling role. I chose with field, then I specified AH. The principle here that I think is important to note is that the The thing that goes first in your query is the fundamental feature or token that you are looking for. We were looking for a word containing thus, okay? We're looking for a word segment that contained thus. And then we added these other contextual parts to the search. So the first thing that needs to come in your query when you're doing menu-driven search is the kind of the lowest level, the most basic level. What are you looking for? What's the segment or the token that you are looking for? And then you add the contextual information. So now we have that, right? And I think this shows, we're just gonna switch it up. All I have to do now is just change. So there were 17 hits for arts and humanities, and now there are 10 hits in the sciences. So that's a finding, right? To compare those two and see if that's a statistically significant difference, we'd have to do chi-squares, and we'll get to that later. Okay, so, and we could run that search on second as well. Run low on time here. So here's second in the arts and humanities, and here's second in the physical science. Just saying. While we're at it, let's just do it. Secondly. Nothing in the physical sciences. And 5 instances in the arts and humanities. So take that for what it's worth. I'm not offering any interpretations of these searches at the moment because that is not my job. That takes a little bit more thought. So let's get back to some of these other queries that my friends had suggested. So we've got the thus and the secondly. We have the which clauses in the different disciplines. Let's do that. All right, so this is going to get us familiar with the mood system a little bit more. I'm going to clean up everything here, delete all these other relations. All right, and I'm going to go into mood and, well, actually, I think this will be easier if we look at the layers, the scheme here. So which clauses are a form of relative clause, and so we need to see if we can find that in the system network. As it turns out, it is in the mood system. Hope I didn't pass it up. This is the group stuff. Complex. Where's clause? Here's clause. Knew I was going to skip it. Okay, finite clause structure. Simple finite clause, relative clause, fact clause, that clause, WH clause. I don't really know why that is not like a subset of relative clauses, but at any rate, which clauses are going to be a form of a relative clause usually? We could also look at WH clauses, but that's going to give us who, where, what, all those other kind of clauses. So let's just, we know this is the feature that we want to play with, the relative clause, and then we're going to specify we want relative clauses with the word which in it. Now that's, you know, that's a somewhat dubious or tricky query, because you could conceivably have a relative clause where which is in it, but it's not at the head. But we can kind of filter those out. So let's do this. We'll go into mood, and we know this is in relative clause. That's the feature that we're going to look for. There we go. And then we'll do pretty much the same thing that we did a second ago, containing which. Oops. And then we'll add the in segment documents with field disciplinary group AH. Actually, let's just let's do this. Okay. Because I only have so much time now. So we have 121 hits of which clauses. It looks like pretty much everything here is where, yep, it did catch one of them. This is a that clause with a which clause embedded. Just scanning these results really quick. See if there are any others where which is not the head. Here's a through which. Oh, wow. I wonder if my friend was wanting to exclude which clauses that were not part of prepositional groups. That's definitely a possibility. We would then want to probably use an and not operator to exclude things like through, in, and of. Let's try this. I don't know what's going to happen if we do this, but we'll try it. It's a relative clause and it's not part of a prepositional group, prepositional phrase. Did that? No, it didn't. It did not limit the clause. Okay, let's try and not. And not preposition. Maybe that will do it. No, it didn't do it. Okay, well, that's another thing to look into maybe next time. At any rate, let's do the quick comparison here. So we're going to switch over to physical science. We have 121 hits here, 78 in the physical sciences. That's probably statistically significant, I would guess. We would have to run the chi-squares there, but that is quite a difference. I'm also seeing a couple errors here. This is a which clause that's embedded. I wonder if immediately would limit this a little bit. Nope. We've got the random error quoted is derived from yada, yada, yada. So this was just a relative clause. I don't know why it got tagged that way. Here's a when. A when clause that also has so there's like two errors, which is pretty much what we had in the previous search as well. There's the third one. Origin gives a formula. Okay. I'm not seeing anything else here. So 3 errors, 2 errors in the other one. That's still probably a significant difference. Let me go back really quick to the query that my friend was asking about. Distribution and function. That one's going to have to be handled in the statistics count, which we'll probably address at a different time. But that's a basic frequency comparison between the different disciplines. So at any rate, there's that. Let's look at maybe one more. I'm sorry I'm not getting to all of these today. Let's try as a conjunction. I did run this search earlier. So what we're going to do here is we're going to look for conjunction, which is part of the mood system. There are, so I'm looking here for a conjunction containing the word as in physical science right now. There's 60 hits there. And 74 in arts and humanities. Let's deal with this in maybe the discipline specific. So English, 45 versus history, 29. I'm not going to try and deal with the physical sciences because that subcorpus is quite complex. So there's that. We could also look at genres, but I'll be honest, I don't remember all the genres that are a part of the metadata that we incorporated last time. And the other thing that we would have to deal with in terms of genre comparisons, at least for Baway, is that the metadata only deals with genre families and not specific genres. Genre families can still be very interesting and useful to look at. And some of the genre families I would consider, or at least in our research, we've considered them specific genres like case studies. But there are also genre families like essay in the Baway corpus, which covers, there's so much variation in the essay genre family. So so we would want to maybe rebuild the subcorpus to ask genre-specific questions. But I think the subcorpus that we have built here is really decent for at least looking at comparisons across disciplines. So we've done some pretty complex searches here, and certainly seen how we can do comparisons across different subcorpora based off of field. I think we didn't get into every single relation here that is available. Let me see. We did containing string, we did in segment, we did with field, we did filling role. We didn't do anything dealing with containing segment. So let's do one of those just very quickly. We would want to start with a larger segment and then, yeah. Let's try. We could kind of reverse the question here. We could do documents. Oh, you know what? Let's use one of the layers that I just came up with a few minutes ago. So let's look at any clause containing a segment. What feature do we want to look at? Any clause containing a nominalization. this is going to return not the nominalization, but the clause in which the nominalization occurs, which may or may not be useful. You can get some kind of contextual information, obviously, from this. So we have 1,900 hits. It's a lot, but we've got the nominalization information here. Let's try immediately and see if that changes anything. Nope, not at all. Okay, I still don't know the difference between anywhere and immediately, so I will try and answer that question later on. I've gone a little over time here, but I did want to just kind of finish up all the information that I wanted to kind of cover here. So see if there's anything that I missed. Different interpolations, and we've seen how they all can be used to generate different kinds of search queries. Here we've been doing mostly kind of comparisons across disciplinary groups, but you can use those relations to satisfy whatever kind of question that you're trying to answer. My friends who asked questions about those relative clause issues, specifically who and that, we will get to those in the next webinar, I guess. And it will be dealing with how to write those kind of questions in the Corpus query language. Before I finish up here, I do want to mention one tiny bit of housekeeping. Oh, I forgot. I want to put this up every single time that we use the Baway corpus because it's such a wonderful resource, and I want to make sure that we give credit to everyone who helped build that corpus. So there we go. And the one last thing I wanted to mention was that for a variety of reasons, which you can read about on the UAM-CT message board, I've decided to create a Facebook group that kind of shares highlights of discussions that are happening on the UAM-CT group message board. You can access the Facebook group for the UAM-CT by running a search on, you can take a look at that URL right there. It's really easy, the UAM-CT group, okay? So facebook.com/groups/UAM-CT group. That's where you can find it. You can join us right there, and you'll get updates about the discussions going on the message board, which is where most or all the conversation is going to happen. And then also the webinars, I'm going to be having a Facebook event there, so you can kind of keep track of that on the Facebook group if you're on Facebook. If not, then please join us in discussing our work with the UAM-CT in the message board, which you can always go to at uamctgroup.org. Okay. Doesn't look like we don't have anything right now, so anything new anyway. But at any rate, I wanted to mention that so we can we have these two different groups so that we can grow as users of the tool. As we've seen in just the past few weeks, it's an incredibly powerful tool. It has so many different features. I'm even learning about as I'm teaching you this webinar. So it's such a powerful tool. At the same time, we can't harness that power if we don't share our experiences, share our research, and I'm hoping that on the message board we can do that, and we can kind of create a community of practice. So I encourage you to join us there, and thanks a lot for watching.